All right, get ready, because today we are going to really dig into this whole thing about
why talented people like totally mess up when things get really intense.
And to do that, we're using Malcolm Gladwell's The Art of Failure.
As like our roadmap for this deep dive.
Oh, yeah.
Have you read this New Yorker piece?
I have. It's a good one.
It is so good. It grabbed me from the very beginning, and I
can't wait to like break it all down with you.
Yeah, it makes you think about how our brains, even like the best of the best,
can just totally betray us when we need them the most.
Yeah, you think you've got it all together.
And then boom.
Right.
So Gladwell, he starts us off with this crazy story about Jana Novotna.
Remember her from the 93 Wimbledon final?
Yeah.
She's like 1 point away
from beating Steffi Graf. I mean, talk about a legend, right?
Oh, yeah.
For sure.
And it all just falls apart. Like suddenly she's hitting double faults.
Missing shots. She's like a completely different player.
It's like she forgot how to play.
Right.
It's the perfect example of what Gladwell calls choking.
Like your brain just goes blank when the pressure's on?
Oh, yeah. And it's not just a tennis thing or whatever.
Remember Chuck Knobloch, that Yankees second baseman?
Oh,
who,
yeah.
like, suddenly
How would you forget that?
couldn't throw the ball to first base.
It was brutal. And all those years of practice just gone.
I know.
But that's where Gladwell, he takes it a step further.
He says it's not just about messing up.
It's about your brain, like, reverting back to when you were a total beginner.
Like, when the stakes get high, you forget everything you know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Instead of trusting your gut, your instincts.
You start overthinking, second-guessing every single move.
And that's what trips you up.
Wow. So interesting. But then Gladwell, he throws this curveball at us.
He's like, hold on, choking is one thing, but then there's panicking.
And the example he uses?
Oh, yeah.
I'm not even kidding. It's terrifying. The scuba diving story?
Yeah.
Oh, my gosh. Chills.
It's intense.
This young woman.
First time doing an open water dive without an instructor. Talk about pressure.
Her air supply messes up and she just completely loses it.
Forgets everything.
Yeah.
She even forgets she has a backup air source.
And that's the big difference between choking and panicking.
Choking is overthinking. Panicking is pure instinct taking over.
Your brain basically hits the eject button.
Oh, wow. So it's like your brain is trying to save you.
But those instincts, your fight or flight response?
That always helpful, right?
Not always.
Especially when you need to stay calm.
Exactly. And to really hammer that home.
Gladwell takes us to like the ultimate high-stakes situation.
The plane crash that killed John F. Kennedy Jr.
Wow. Okay, so we're going from tennis courts to scuba diving.
Now to a plane crash. Talk about keeping things interesting.
So what's the connection here?
He's saying that there's this link between choking and panicking.
And using Kennedy's plane crash to show it. Like this really tragic example.
Joe Kennedy, he's flying at night.
Not the best conditions, and he loses control of the plane.
And the official report, they say it was spatial disorientation?
Basically, he couldn't tell which way was up in the dark.
Oh, wow.
And didn't Gladwell actually get in a plane himself?
He did.
To like understand what that's like?
Yeah, he wanted to see it firsthand.
Even had an experienced pilot there explaining everything.
And the way he describes that feeling of like
spiraling down, but everything inside the cockpit seems totally normal.
It's freaky. You lose all sense of where you are.
Your body's like internal compass, it just can't keep up.
So even with all those instruments right there in front of him.
Kennedy was basically flying blind.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And this is where the choking versus panicking thing.
It gets really interesting. If Kennedy had choked,
he might have like overthought every gauge, every control.
But that could have saved him. Believe it or not.
Wait, really? Because it would force him to actually think about the flying.
Exactly.
Instead of just reacting on instinct, which was wrong in this case.
Right.
But everything points to Kennedy panicking.
Instead of like working through the problem step by step.
He probably just fixated on one thing. Where are the lights?
You know those lights of Martha's Vineyard?
Our brains do that when we panic. We search for something familiar.
Oh, wow.
And in that panic, he misses crucial stuff from the instruments.
Makes adjustments that made things worse.
Stuck in that loop of panic.
That's scary how your rational mind can just be
completely gone when things get really intense.
I know. And then it gets even more interesting.
Gladwell brings up this idea of stereotype threat.
Oh, yeah. So now we're going from like
tennis courts and cockpits to classrooms and basketball courts.
Right.
He connects everything.
I love that.
So he talks about this researcher, Claude Steele,
who found that when you remind people of those negative stereotypes,
you know, the ones about their race, their gender, whatever,
it creates this pressure that really messes with their performance.
You mean like
just knowing there's a stereotype about you makes you nervous? And then you actually do worse.
Exactly. It's not that they're not capable.
It's the fear of proving that stereotype.
Right.
Gladwell talks about these studies where Black students did worse on tests.
When they were told it was an intelligence test.
Oh, wow.
But when they were told it was just problem solving.
They did just as well as the white students.
So just changing how they thought about the test?
Made a huge difference.
Huge difference. The stereotype became a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Wow.
And it's not just school stuff either.
Think about how women often score lower on math tests.
When they're reminded of that stereotype that men are better at math.
But take away that stereotype and suddenly everyone's equal.
That's like those stereotypes.
They become this hidden pressure that leads to choking.
Exactly. And because it's choking,
Telling someone to calm down or try harder.
it's not going to help. It might even backfire.
So what can we do about it?
Gladwell says maybe we've been thinking about this all wrong.
He talks about Greg Norman's meltdown at the Masters.
This top golfer just falls apart on the last day.
Oh, yeah.
And while Gladwell's not letting Norman off the hook,
He does want us to think about the pressure on him.
the weight of everyone's expectations.
It's all those eyes on him.
And then he says something radical. What if
Instead of these situations being pass or fail,
we saw them as opportunities?
opportunities, like, what do you mean? So instead of being terrified of these big
We
moments
could look at them as like chances to learn something new.
about ourselves, about what we can really do,
Right. It's a total mind shift.
instead of thinking, I can't mess this up,
It's more like, this is my chance to grow, even if I stumble a bit.
it takes the pressure off that whole win or lose thing, right?
Exactly.
It's not just about the finish line.
It's about the journey, right?
So learning a skill,
Mhm.
failing, sometimes getting back up.
Yeah. And Gladwell, he ends with this really powerful moment.
Between Greg Norman and Nick Faldo, remember after Norman totally bombed at the Masters?
Faldo, he wins, right?
Right.
But he's not like celebrating or anything.
He's actually feeling for Norman.
Because they both knew what it felt like to be under that kind of pressure.
Totally. It's like they both understood
That even the best of the best can crack.
that anyone can choke.
Exactly. It's part of being human.
We all fail sometimes. It's how we handle it that matters.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Do we let it define us?
Or do we use it to learn, grow, come back stronger?
Now, that's a good question.
So next time you're facing something that seems impossible.
Remember those stories? Remember Jana Novotna?
Talking of Blauk, even John F. Kennedy Jr.,
They're not just cautionary tales.
they remind us that messing up those stumbles,
They're actually chances to grow.
I like that. A lot.
Just maybe if we think about it that way.
We can turn those potential failures into wins.
You know what?
I think you just summed up this whole deep dive.
Well, that's what we do here, right?
Break it all down. Find those little nuggets of wisdom.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the art of failure.
We hope you learned something new today.
Maybe even changed your perspective on failing a little.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions.
And most importantly, keep learning.